Hey, it's Economic Invincibility. Today we're going to talk about the computer science major. Is it worth your time, money, and efforts? This is a popular choice for those who see the salary projections, but it's important to go beyond that and understand exactly what you're getting yourself into. Depending on the school, in the computer science department, there will be different concentrations. So maybe software or hardware engineering, web development, or cybersecurity, to name a few. And your choice in that regard will have a certain effect on which route you take when you get out and actually start working. But beyond that, you might add, well, does the school name matter? It does to a certain extent, but a lot of mainstream public universities have decent computer science departments, so it's not like if you don't get into MIT, you're absolutely screwed. The main thing to pay attention to is what's the alumni network like? Do they do a good job of placing people in internships and eventually jobs, as where you gain experience is very important in this industry. Beyond that, you also need to pay attention to the economics. One of the biggest complaints of people who work in IT or computer science is that there's a lot of upheaval. There's buyouts, mergers, sometimes you work on a contractual basis. And so against that, you have to be fortifying yourself and making yourself extremely valuable. So I'll get into that in just a second. You look at the economic projections in the BLS, most of the jobs related to computer science have double-digit growth projections, although computer programmers are seen as going down 8%. And we don't take the BLS as the sainted truth because it's not, it's just a start, but it is worth paying attention to. And they say the reason why computer programmers are declining in demand is because it's easier to do that programming worldwide. But as much as you can outsource that, a lot of these other jobs ultimately can also be outsourced. And then you have the United States, people coming in on visas, sometimes from, let's say, India, they have a PhD in computer science, and they're undercutting the graduate who has just a BA in computer science. They might ask for the same or even a lesser salary. And there is, of course, some debate if these people coming in have the same skills as those who have gone to American universities, but that's a topic for another time. The main issue to focus on if you are looking at computer science is that there is going to be competition. So if you think, oh, I'm just going to go to school, take the classes, graduate, get a job, well, that's not going to work in every instance. You need to be going out there on your own time and maybe learning other languages, getting familiar with programs. Because you see these jobs that are advertised, yeah, they might have nice salaries, but they expect a pretty diverse skill set. And you're not going to get that simply from being in a university class. So if your intention is maybe to be an app developer, well, you should be in your own time making your own apps, not saying, oh, I'm just going to do it as a class project, because that's not going to be enough. Oftentimes in the IT industry, if you have experience and you're good enough, that can go beyond someone having a particular certification or they have a degree, because ultimately skill is important. If some guy has a PhD in computer science and he does the programming and he screws it up, and another guy doesn't have that PhD, comes and has to fix it, who are they going to really rely on? You can imagine, okay? So beyond that, I'm going to talk about 3 job areas that are pretty solid going forward. This is not all exhaustive, and some people are going to say, what? Why didn't you include this? It's not to say the others are bad. It just means that these are pretty decent locks for the future. So to start out, you have being a software or app developer. This is big, the demand. I think the growth is like 17%. Good salaries, but like I was saying, developing those skills inside and outside of the classroom is going to be important, because it's a difficult industry. If you might be working, but then you might get laid off or there's a buyout, well, you have to be making yourself constantly fortified against that and against competition. That's where you're going to see a lot of big money going forward, is in the development side, particularly with apps, because everything seems to be going smaller into phones. Making effective programs and apps is very critical for the modern economy. Beyond that, you have the government side. And the federal government, of course, has recently started the big cybersecurity program. That's a solid area to be in. Also local governments, though. Many of them are still struggling to move into what we see as being 2017, the 21st century, in terms of like job applications. They still use paper applications. So if you go into these smaller municipal governments like towns and counties, get in with an internship while you're in college, you can potentially be hired and move up. And the advantage there is that while you don't necessarily get paid as much as the developer, you have stability and security. It's harder for you to be knocked out of the park by a foreign worker or just a buyout or something like that, because usually government employees don't lose their jobs unless they do something seriously egregious. And you also potentially will still get the government retirement depending on where you're working. Finally, one thing to keep in mind would be teaching computer science like at the high school level. And you say, that doesn't make much sense. Why would you go into computer science for that end? Well, again, it's a stable career. It's hard to get fired as a teacher. There is a demand for it because as much as things are transitioning towards technology, a lot of people say you can't start training people in college. You need to have computer science courses in high school already. So that's a certain field that if you can get into, get a secure job, you're probably not going to lose it because that's where we're heading. I mean, with all the automation, with all the growth of technology being used for everything, you need people to be competent with it. It's not going to be, oh, just talk to the younger kids, because the younger kids are going to know a certain amount and their kids and grandkids will know even more. But it's not enough that you can be, a Luddite and against technology anymore, because it's so critical to everyday life. So that's going to be my view of computer science. It's certainly not a bad field to go into, but you need to understand the different headwinds in terms of competition, how the industries are changing, and how you can compete against that and make yourself as employable and secure as possible. So any questions, please drop them below and let me know other majors you want to see profiled here in the future.